Inspired talks of Swami Vivekananda, Pranam Mantra. Om Namah Shri Yati Rajaya Vivekananda Suraye Sachit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Today we will discuss what Swamiji had discussed on Monday, July 29th, 1895. It's about God realization. What God realization is like, what exactly is God realization, and how do we perceive this world, how do we know these objects, and how mind and our senses cannot know God. Now, before we get into what Swamiji is saying, I'll give you just a quick review because we have discussed this thing many times in the past, but it needs repeated telling. That how exactly perception changes when you become contemplative, meditative, and truly meditative. What happens when your Kundalini rises? What happens when you move from this gross world to the subtle world and to further causal world, etc.? I'll have to use my favorite example, this pen. Now, when we look at this pen, we know what exactly it is and what work it does. Think of how it was manufactured. It was manufactured in a company, in a factory, where some technocrats, some engineers, some workers had complete control over certain matter, plastic, and say ink. And by using certain tools and machineries, they put together matter which was otherwise lying just in any way, and they put them together and made it a pen. Whenever I see a generator moving, there was a time when I was connected with some of these maintenance work in one of our centers, and it always amused me. And of course, it's something very obvious that we all know that there is just chunk of iron pieces, and there is diesel or petrol, and you put them in a particular order, it creates electricity, lights up the houses, makes our fans run, fridges run, ACs run, etc. Now, if you are given a piece of iron and you are given a can of petrol, can you do anything with it? No, you can do nothing with it. Only those who have mastered matter in certain particular certain aspects that they can do it. They can make it work. Now, those of you who have listened to our Raj Yoga talks, and if you have not, I request you to listen to our Raj Yoga talks. And every time I say that, listen to our Raj Yoga talks, because there's a uniformity. In Raj Yoga talks, we find that when you start meditating, say on this pen, as your concentration increases, you have complete control over its material nature. And that is what scientists do. When the scientists go into deeper layers of contemplation, they understand the nature of matter. For example, when Einstein or Newton, they went into deeper thinking of, say, universe, they understood how things work. And that's how we have so many things today. Today, if technology has made our life easier, it's because of those scientists who went deeper, thought over matter, the nature of matter, and gave us certain conclusions. As your concentration goes deeper, you break through its defenses. It doesn't remain matter anymore. You realize it as tanmatras. Tanmatras are those finer particles, finest particles that are grasped by our five senses. That's why we have five tanmatras: earth, air, water, fire, sky, etc. And then you go deeper and you master that completely. If you can master that, you can convert a pen in anything. You can convert it into a piece of chocolate. You can convert it into a snake. You can convert it in anything. Those of you who have read my book, Kratu, you'll find that Kratu had this power. And to him, it was so simple, so easy. And we have hundreds and thousands of stories in Indian traditions where yogis can perform miracles. Apparently, these sound as miracles, but they are not miracles. They are just just a way an engineer masters material and matter and produces things out of raw material into certain finished products. Just like that, yogis can produce certain things out of tanmatras. If you go deeper, then well, then comes cosmic mind and mother nature itself, and your power keeps on increasing. A time comes when there is nothing else to contemplate upon. You have been contemplating upon, say, pen, that is matter, then its constituent material, then the mind, then prakriti. Your power increases. And finally, there is nothing to contemplate upon. And then you have to let go of this empire of mind. Once you let go of this empire of mind, you become what you are, Atman. This realm, this truth about Atman, has been described variously by different sages, saints, masters. The best expression that we have is Sachidananda. Sachidananda is an expression that truly, truly and rightly explains what God realization is like. Because you have gone beyond your senses, you have gone beyond your mind, you have gone beyond, you have gone completely beyond the empires of mind. Nothing else remains. So, how can you really describe it? No, you cannot. Those of you who have studied the biography of Sri Ramakrishna know it so well that Sri Ramakrishna had lived with the thought of Mother Kali and he had known Mother Kali. It's like being one with the Prakriti, the fourth. And finally, he went beyond it. When you go beyond it, whatever your experience, how will you describe it to people who are not familiar with it? You can describe something only to persons who already know it. A person who doesn't know cannot understand what you are talking about. That's why people who are poetry blind, there are many people who are poetry blind. They don't have that finer sense of poetry. If you try reciting poetry to them, they will not understand what exactly it's about. You take a beautiful flower to you. A flower will denote beauty, color, love, devotion. Put it before a cow, it will chew it up. A cow doesn't realize the beauty of a flower. So, to explain something to someone, that person must have a fairly good idea about that thing. You can just add value to it. That's why Sri Ramakrishna was constantly praying to Mother to bring to him right disciples. Because then he could talk. Otherwise, he won't be able to talk. People won't understand him. And that's what happened. Even the learned persons, the intellectuals of Kolkata, even greats like Keshav Chandra Sen could not understand what Sri Ramakrishna was talking about. So, how to describe? There is one way to describe is that you describe something by its surroundings. In Kenopanishad, and we will be taking up Kenopanishad someday. In Kenopanishad, there is this beautiful example when the gods won a fight against the battle against the demons, asuras. They were victorious and they were claiming victory for themselves when something completely unknown appeared before them and they could not make out what it was. Vayu, Agni, Indra, different gods, they went. They couldn't understand. And then suddenly there was an appearance, Uma. She told that it was Brahman. It's a story. Through this story, it's trying to convey to us that a person who doesn't know Brahman, a person who doesn't know God, cannot know God. A person who doesn't know Brahman cannot understand what Brahman is. A person who doesn't know Atman cannot know what Atman is. So what we do is sometimes we describe it by certain characteristics, and one of those characteristics is its surroundings. For example, it's not a very good example, but supposing there is a crowd and there is a gentleman, he needs to be called, and we don't know what his name is. You may say that, oh, well, go. A person you find standing there in the middle or standing lonely, get him, call him, ask him to come. Or there might be an American, and you say that, you see that American standing there, call him. Even if you do not know about him, you know him by his surroundings, by his appearance, certain spatial characteristics. When God is described, he is always described by the surroundings. Why? As we mentioned just now, God realization is completely beyond senses, completely beyond the comprehension of the mind. So the only way that the masters can describe God to persons like us who are curious but who have absolutely no idea about what God is, for them, surrounding is used. This is one important point. Second important point is just now we were discussing this pen and how perception changes. A, a person with gross eyes, that means us, will see it as a pen. But a yogi whose mind has concentrated to that level where he can see that this is a product of tanmatras, he'll see it as tanmatras, combination of such and such material. But he will also see it as a pen. Similarly, a person who has reached that level of mind, he will see it as product of certain aspects of mind. That doesn't mean that he will stop seeing it as a pen. And a person like Sri Ramakrishna or Jesus, who has known God, how will he see it? He'll see it both as pen and pure consciousness. The existence of pen does not matter, but in the sense of physical sense. So the same thing, same pen now appears, according to our understanding, differently. A yogi will see it differently. Saint who has risen higher will see it differently. And a person who has known God will see it differently. Yet, all the four truths are true. You cannot say that this is correct and that is not correct. When you're seeing it from the standpoint of absolute, the pen doesn't have any existence. And yet, pen has existence. Even if, say, for example, if Sri Ramakrishna had to write, he would have to use this pen or whatever pen. And yet, he will know that actually it is absolute. With this idea clear, we can see what Swamiji was discussing that day. Things will become easy, and that's why I like to give a complete picture of whatever Swamiji is going to discuss. He says, we sometimes indicate a thing by describing the surrounding. When we say Satchidananda, that is existence, knowledge, bliss, we are merely indicating the shores of an indescribable beyond. This is God, the indescribable beyond. When you talk about God, you are standing on the shore of Satchidananda Sagar and you are describing what? The indescribable beyond. Any expression that is used about God, whatever, when you say God the merciful, God the just, God this, God that, you are actually trying to point at the indescribable beyond. God. What is God? The indescribable beyond. Dear listeners, if you ask me, this is the best epithet of God. God has been described variously: Father in heaven, God the merciful, God the mother. But if you ask me, I'll say God, the indescribable beyond. That's the best epithet, the best way to describe God. Jews also use the same thing, Jehovah. When they use the word Jehovah, they mean the same thing, that which cannot be named. Not even can we say is about it, because in existence, Sat is existence, the isness. When we discuss Shankaracharya Advaita, we often discuss isness, pure existence. Swamiji says, no, we cannot, for that too is relative. Actually, take my words. Of course, if you have faith in my words, forming even the slightest, the faintest idea about God, Atman, Brahman, is a near impossibility. Unless you have done sadhana, intense sadhana, and understood a bit of the world beyond. If you are totally immersed in this physical world, it is difficult for you to form even the slightest idea about all these things. They are all same. God and Atman and Brahman, they are all same. When Swamiji says that you are standing at the shore and talking about the indescribable beyond, that's the best illustration, the best expression that we can have. Now, when Acharya Shankara uses this example of isness is something that never gets destroyed. We have explained it many times in Kathopanishad, etc. In Ishopanishad also we have described. I request you to listen to those talks if you have time. Says that is relative because isness presupposes non-existence. Any imagination, any concept is in vain when it comes to describing Atman. Neti, not this, is all that can be said. For even to think is to limit, so to lose. Think of God and you will lose Him. You know what are the conclusions? They can be dangerous and devastating. Meditate on God and you will lose Him. Pray to God and you will lose Him. Worship God and you will lose Him. Why? Because you are limiting Him. Why do people do all that? They all, Sri Ramakrishna himself worshipped, Sri Ramakrishna prayed, Sri Ramakrishna meditated. It was to realize that these are actually all meaningless. Whom will you worship who is present everywhere? Whom will you pray to who is present everywhere? But when you do all this, your mind becomes concentrated. Once your mind becomes concentrated, you start outgrowing the limitations. There are lots of upadhis. Upadhis means limitations, certain qualities, certain qualifications that you put on something to understand that. Those things are removed. That is how God realization is achieved. Then Swamiji talks about how senses are great, great cheats. In India, we have a very long tradition of cheats, and they cheated in every possible way. And the senses are the greatest cheats. Maya is considered to be the greatest cheat, and senses are its grandchildren, far more adept, far more experts. What is the USP of the senses? Unique selling point, the power to cheat. It's terrible, I tell you. Inspire talks can change your life forever. The senses cheat you day and night. They do. I don't mix much with the society, and total number of my acquaintances at any given point of time would be less than 100, That is a total. And people whom I know intimately would be barely 15, 20, not more than that. So my knowledge about society is meager. But the little that I hear from them and what I read here and there, it's pathetic. The world is burning. It burned earlier also, but now the burning has increased. It's like there's a huge conflagration. Everyone is burning. And very often, sometimes people come to us crying. Oh, I loved her so much. And she comes and says, I loved him so much. And there's such a dark side, dark being within that beautiful face or behind that beautiful nature. So, who cheated you? Your senses. You see a beautiful face, you're charmed. You hear beautiful words and you are charmed. You see beautiful manners and you are charmed. And then you find that you have been cheated. A successful salesman, a successful salesman has to have very good appearance. He must be a smooth talker. And when I say smooth talker, I mean smooth talker. They can sell you anything. They can cheat you to any extent. That's what makes them a successful salesman. Vedanta found that out ages ago. Modern science is just discovering the same fact. Bertrand Russell had beautifully written about how we are cheated day and night, and he uses the example of, say, a table. Till the microscope was discovered, etc., we didn't even know that wood is not uniform. Now, if you look at a table or anything thing which appeared solid, etc., if you look through very powerful lens, you'll see it's not smooth. Swami says we knew it all along. A picture has only length and breadth, and the painter copies nature in her cheating by artificially giving the appearance of depth. Those of you who have done painting, you know that basically any canvas, any canvas is two-dimensional, and yet a good painter gives depth, makes it look as if it's three-dimensional. Your senses get cheated, or rather, your senses cheat you. No two people see the same world. The highest knowledge will show you that there is no motion, no change in anything, that the very idea of it all is Maya. It's extremely disturbing. Swami is talking from his own realization, from his own knowledge. When you reach that state of, as we mentioned, Sri Ramakrishna's Advaita experience, and every saint in India, every sage in India, every spiritual aspirant in India wants to have that knowledge, that experience, that oneness. Once you reach there, you realize that there is no motion. Think of movies of earlier times. There used to be a screen, or even now, it's computer screen, just like that. There's so much of motion, this, that, and you start thinking of this is moving. Then what is moving? Nothing is moving. Neither the screen is moving, nor the characters are moving. It's just not even the pictures are moving. It's just the projector and the reel on the projector that moves. The light behind it is fixed. Everything is fixed. And yet, what moves? The mind moves. The mind moves. And once you have that highest knowledge, you realize there is no motion. There is no variety. Oh, it can be so disturbing. It's all Maya. Study nature as a whole. When you study nature as a whole, then you realize that is steady motion. Mind and body are not our real self. Both belong to nature. But eventually, we can know the ding an sich. That is, thing as it is. What is nature? Just motion. And this motion is appearance. Then mind and body being transcended, all that they conceive goes. Mind and senses, they just conceive. There are no objects. There is no motion. I am moving this pen. You can see this pen moving. Neither there is pen nor there is motion. It can be so disturbing. But as we mentioned in the beginning, to know that it doesn't have any motion and know that it doesn't have any name and form, first you have to reach that level of the absolute. Once you reach that level, you will realize this. What Swamiji is discussing is not philosophy, he's just talking truth. When you see utterly to know and see the world, then you realize Atman. Now, what is God realization? God realization, you are focusing on this pen, and you go to that level of concentration where the pain doesn't exist. Tanmatras do not exist, mind does not exist. Pure consciousness exists. Existence of object is gone. The existence of material is gone, matter is gone, the world is gone. And the world vanishes because the mind has vanished. When you see utterly to know and see the world, you realize, Atman, the superseding of relative knowledge is what we want. This is relative knowledge. When we know, when we see this pen, when we know this pen, it's relative knowledge is not absolute knowledge. There is no infinite mind or infinite knowledge. Like there were some philosophers who talked about infinite mind because both mind and knowledge are limited. Mind is limited, so knowledge has to be limited. It's obvious. We are now seeing through a field well when we reach the X, which is the reality of all our knowing. So there is this infinite reality before us. And the infinite is watching that infinite, but through a glass. And that glass is our mind. So what do we see? We see objects, we see motion, we see love, we see hatred, whatever. And all our suffering is all because of that, because we have put on that lens. We ourselves have put on that. No one else has put that lens. Swamiji gives an example. If we look at a picture through a pinhole in a cardboard, we get an utterly mistaken notion. Yet what we see is really the picture. What Swamiji is discussing is, think of a picture and the blinders are put on you. You will be seeing a very small part of that picture. But actually you are seeing the picture. The world is exactly like this. There is this infinite God before us. But like seeing a picture through a pinhole, we are seeing the infinite through the blinders. Blinders have been put, and this is just a small hole. As you move your head, you get the notion of the movement. Picture is not moving, you are moving. And as the size of the hole increases, the size of picture also increases. You think that the picture is growing. Well, no, picture is not growing. Your hole is growing. See, Ramakrishna uses this example that there's a garden and there's a lot of mirth and enjoyment going on. And there's a wall. Somebody makes a hole. Through that hole, you are seeing that enjoyment, the joy. But that's not the whole of it. Sometimes you may come across a larger whole. Incarnation of God is like that large hole. People and objects, these are very small holes. When you love somebody and when you meet that somebody, you feel that joy. Where is that joy coming from? The joy comes from God. You're seeing God. But you're seeing God through that small hole. Because you're seeing through the small hole, your joy is also limited. It's so limited that after some time you want someone new in your life. That's what the problem is. Because when you are moving from person to person, object to object, like a small boy growing from books to books and toys to toys, the joy that a kid gets, it's the same kind of joy that we get. Our Acharya Shankar has beautifully written, when a kid, they find enjoyment in games. When they grow up, they find enjoyment in relationships. Actually, it's the same God, just that you are getting that enjoyment through a pinhole, nothing. That's what Swamiji describes and says, the picture itself is unaltered. God never changes. It's your mind that is expanding. And because your mind expands, you find a better person, you find a better way. Those of you who have been doing sadhana, I don't know how many of you do sadhana seriously. If you have been doing sadhana, you will see that when you sit for meditation, when you're face to face with God, you feel so happy, you feel so calm, you feel so serene. Why? That's when your mind is seeing God through a larger whole. Very often you will see that those of you who are contemplative by nature, when you are alone, you are left alone with no responsibilities, no duty, nothing, you feel so happy for a while. Even if that be for a very short while, you are enjoying the bliss of God through a larger whole. That is because Atman is the reality of all. Everything is Atman. Every time you find joy, happiness, you have to know that the joy of Atman getting expressed through that object, through that person. Oh, it's so simple, so true, so profound. All we see is Atman, but not as we see it, as name and form. They're all in our veil in Maya. That's a trick. God, as if divides itself in two, looking at itself through a veil, makes whole. Persons whom I love, they are one of those holes through which the joy comes to me. It's like the conduit, the pipe. There's a huge tank, water supply tank, and we need water and we need these pipelines, flows. Joy of God flows like those of you who have been listening to these talks and loving these talks. There's nothing special about these talks. There's nothing special about me. Thing is, you have found out that hole through which larger amount of joy flows towards you. And that's why you love it. Whenever you love some person, some object, some talk, something, know that you're seeing God, you're experiencing Atman through a whole. And as your knowledge expands, you'll be finding better persons, better holes. And if it's really a good hole for you, mind it, you will stay stuck with it till the time you get bored and look for larger hole. So what are the objects? Because objects have no reality. There's only Atman. Swamiji uses a very beautiful example which you normally do not find anywhere because Swamiji belongs to our age. So it was easy for him to give examples that we can understand. They are like spots in the object glass of a telescope. Any telescope has two sets of glasses. Now, we are not discussing modern telescopes, but generally, is the this object glass and there is eyepiece. You look through the eyepiece and there is that object. Object captures and eyepiece enlarges. That's how you see things. And think of the object glass having some spots. You're seeing those spots too, obviously. If you make a video call and if there's a spot on that lens, that spot will be there. Yet it is the light of the sun that shows us the spot. If there was no light of sun, then you don't see those spots. We could not even see the illusion, save for the background of reality, which is Brahman. Now, this is amazing. Whatever illusion, Buddhists talk about illusions. And post Shankara Advaita keeps on talking about illusion. Shankaracharya never talked about illusion much. It was always about Shankara was Vigyanvadi. He only talked about Brahman, Brahman, Brahman. Post Shankara, they ruined it to illusion, illusion, illusion. Because they had to argue this system and that system of thought. We see illusion because the light of Atman, light of Brahman is behind it. If there is no light, you cannot see the spot on the lens. To see the spot on the lens, you need light. Just like that, there has to be the light of consciousness behind it, every illusion. If you mistake a snake, if you mistake a rope for a snake in darkness, there is some amount of light. There has to be. If it's complete dark, you'll neither see the rope nor snake. If there is full light, you will see the rope and not the snake. There has to be some light. When we find love in someone, when we dislike someone, when we dislike someone, we hate someone, it only means that the flow of love from God is getting stuck up. Nothing beyond it. The problem is not with the person, the problem is with you. Swami Vivekananda is just a speck on the object glass. It's massive. Every incarnation. Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, they are all specks on the glass. Can be very disturbing for people who have practiced bhakti. Atman is the essence of every hallucination. It's amazing. You know, Acharya Shankara talks like this. When you see a mirage, whether that be on a road or on a desert, there has to have a substratum. Acharya Shankar repeatedly talks about, repeatedly. What is that substratum? Brahman. The Buddhists made a thorough mess of their philosophy by saying that nothing is there, Shunyavad and all that. So such a confused philosophy. Buddhism is such a confused philosophy. Because Buddhism is just, you know, not that I am criticizing Buddha. I have the highest respect for Lord Buddha. But Buddhism is total mess. And no wonder has America has made a fad out of Buddhism. Why? Buddhism is just some basic principles taken from yoga and some amount of myths of the Hindus have been added up. And wherever it has gone, it has added the local mythologies, local stories, and the practices remain intact coming from yoga. And that is what has helped Buddhism survive. And wherever Buddhism was practiced, they turned out to be the most violent people. Look at Sri Lanka, look at Tibet, look at Burma, look at China, look at Japan. Think of the stories of Second World War. Extremely violent people. Whatever their cool manners and all. No, it's a fact. Very surprising. Buddhism, they say religion of peace. And wherever it has been practiced, they have ended up being the most violent people. Very shocking. This is what happens when you have philosophy like Shunyavad and everything being momentary. And to think that Hindus giving up their own such grand philosophy, they run after Buddhism. Atman is the essence of every hallucination. Every time you say love, know that it's Atman there. Yagyavalkya tells his wife that no one loves his wife and no wife loves her husband for being the object. It's because of that person's love for Atman, self. You love wealth not for wealth's sake, you love wealth for the sake of Atman. Wherever you find love, when you see a mom loving her baby, when you see a dog loving its puppies, when you see a lion or a tiger loving its cubs, expression of Atman there. It's for the sake of Atman, for the sake of self that is being loved. But the sun is never identified with the spots on the glass. Obviously, it only shows them to us. Our actions, as they reveal or good, increase or decrease the spots. So now comes the practical philosophy of God realization. When our actions are narrow minded, tending towards exclusiveness, these are bad. When we move more and more towards inclusiveness, they are good. And spots change. But they never affect the God within us. God remains God. Perfectly cleanse the mind of spots, and instantly we see I and my Father are one. This is, beauty of Swamiji. Unmasked. How beautifully Swamiji weaves Christianity with Vedanta. Because that is the fact. When When Jesus talks about I and my Father are one, we can understand. We Vedantins, we can understand. We Hindus, we can understand. Although Christians have committed such torture in India, and there are many more things, anti-Hindu, anti-India. I don't mean all the Christians who are living in India, but Christianity as such, that people don't even want to take their name. But the fact is, as far as the New Testament is concerned, Bible is concerned, of all the scriptures, that is something that comes nearest to Vedanta. Cleanse your mind. Cleanse your mind. And you will realize that you had been thinking of yourself as someone and thinking of God as someone else. God the Father, God the Mother. And then, like Jesus, you will realize that I and my Father are one. It's the spots that separate us. When you want to take a photograph, you need to cleanse the lens, like in phone camera or whatever camera. Cleanse, cleanse. Swamiji from there moves to reasoning, etc. Can God realization take place through reasoning, through objectification? We first perceive, then reason later. So no reason can be there without first perceiving something. When you conclude that there was rain by looking at the wet fields, you have the idea of dry field, and you have the idea of rains, and you have an idea of what rain does to dry field. That's how you conclude. Reasoning is always based on earlier perception. We must have this perception as a fact, and it's called religion, realization. So, if you want to have some discussion on religion, if you want to have some logic, some arguments, first you must have perception. Unless you have seen God, how can you argue about God? People who are arguing about God, explaining God, they must have some knowledge, otherwise, it's meaningless. You might ask me then, why am I talking? Because I can assure you that I don't have any relation of God. Well, I'm explaining inspired also Swami Vivekananda. I'm not explaining God to you, no. I'll never dare it. No matter if one never heard of creed or prophet or book, let him get this realization as Sri Ramakrishna. Even he was not a scholar. He went all out for realization and he had it. And he needs no more. Cleanse the mind. This is all of religion. There have been cases of many people. Many people. India is so full. Like we had Sant Kabir. He was not a scholar. He was not even a Brahmin. But see, he is the highest. When people are talking today in India about Brahmins and Shudras, what about Kabir? Kabir is revered by every Hindu. There was Saint Raidas. He was born in extreme low community. See, he had relation. He's respected. Cleanse the mind. This is all of religion. And until we ourselves clear of the spots, we cannot see the reality as it is. We use the example of that wall which has a hole through which you can see the enjoyment going on. You have to tear down that wall. Unless you tear down that wall, you cannot have the full enjoyment. If you are not able to see the sun or object, whatever, because of the spots need to be cleaned. The baby sees no sun. He has not yet the no measure of it in himself. Get rid of the defects within yourself, and you will not be able to see any without. We are seeing outside. We are seeing this world. We are seeing the objects. Why? These are just spots. If we can cleanse ourselves, see that everything is inside. Nothing is outside. A baby sees a robbery done, and it means nothing to him, obviously. Once you find the hidden object in a puzzle picture, you see it ever more. So when once you are free and stainless, you see only freedom and purity in the world around. When you are free of all emotions, free of all objects, and you are stainless, you have no stain. You become one with freedom, you become one with purity. That moment, all the knots of the heart are cut asunder, all crooked places are made straight, and this world vanishes as a dream. Then you realize that the world, the world that was so important to you, the objects and persons who were so important to you, they're all vanished. And when we awake, we wonder how we ever came to dream such trash. So it was so full of humor and so beautifully. What are we dreaming? Trash. In Indian tradition, we have hundreds of such stories where somebody dreams of going somewhere and seeing somebody and falling in love and start living that kind of life. And one king, he was dreaming like that, and he saw one beautiful woman and fell for her, and she was daughter of buffalo meat seller, and the king became a buffalo meat seller, and that story has dreams within dreams within dreams. Says, getting home, misery mountains high, has no power to move the soul. Gita, Sthita Pragya Lakshan, Gita says, once you have known Atman, no misery can ever affect you. There's no way. So we'll have to stop it here. Time is up. Take up. Swamiji had continued discussing on Monday, July 29th. The remaining portion we will cover the next day. Thank you so much. Om Shanti Shanti.